Welcome to Photography with Gman, where we will work together to improve on your photography skills, both in camera and in mobile. So what are we going to be talking about today? Lighting. Before we understand how we are going to use lighting in photography, let's just look at a few things that we need to understand. First, white balance. White balance is measured in kelvins. So you could either put it in auto. So you basically have two sources of light, white light and yellow light. So if you have yellow light, you'd be using a lower Kelvin like a 3000 or 4000. So if you'd want to give it a warmer look, you'd like to decrease the Kelvin a little more. And if you're getting more white light, like if you're outside on a sunny day or if you've got a tube light, white light, then you'd be using a higher Kelvin to bring it down, to make it more warmer. So you could use the preset as a shortcut, cloudy, fluorescent, bulb, sunny day, depending upon what kind of lighting you have. In photography, you have to understand that you can always control the light on your subject, but not the light in the larger environment, correct? Even if you're shooting a portrait but you're outdoors, so you might have to plan ahead as to what kind of mood you want to set. So whether you want to go there in the morning or whether you want to go in the evening. Okay. Highlights and shadows. For example, the brighter area would of course be the highlight and the darker area would of course be the shadows. Now shadows in essence is not a very bad thing, okay, if you use it right. For example, I've got my key light here, right, at a 45-degree angle. So it's kind of giving me a Rembrandt look. So I've got some shadows falling off on the right side of my face. So that kind of sets the mood for the photo. If you understand light well, playing around with highlights and shadows is going to be very, very essential. You would like to always check your exposure with a histogram. You'll find the histogram in the display. The ideal lighting would be when you have a normal histogram. But if your histogram is more tilted towards the left, it means that you have more shadows. And if your histogram is more towards the right, your picture has more highlights. So ideally what you would want is for it to balance out towards the center, but that situation might not always be so. Always remember that you have to have one source as your key light that is going to light up your subject in terms of portraits. In terms of outdoors, you have the sun and the sun is going to be lighting up everything. Now let's talk about shooting outdoors. If it's not spontaneous and you have the liberty to plan your shot, always think, what time of the day do you want to shoot? Ideally, a lot of photographers would like to shoot during the golden hour. That is more towards the evening when the sun is down and the light is not very harsh. You could either have the sun directly falling on your subject's face, or you could even shoot against the sun, right? If you position it well, so that the sun kind of falls off on the hair or on the back of your subject, and you don't have too much contrast between the highlight and the shadows. Ideally, I would like to avoid midday shooting because you've got the sun right on top of you. When the sun is directly above your subject's head, it kind of gives you a very sharp, dark shadows in the eyes and under the chin as well. And plus, the light is very, very harsh. So you get a very contrasty image. Your bright areas would usually be washed off and your shadows are going to be very, very dark. And when your highlights are washed out, if you're shooting midday, your sky would not be blue, it'd be more white, and you not have a lot of details in the sky. But if you have to shoot midday, what do? I would recommend you to look for a good shadow area where the light is going to be very, very diffused. But on a cloudy day, shooting midday is not a problem because the sunlight is already diffused, so you'll have very good even lighting. Lighting is very, very important even in landscapes, whether you're in the mountains, whether you're by the ocean, whether you're doing cityscape, irrespective, you would like to shoot at the right moment again. You'd always like to choose the time of the day. Beautiful pictures are from a place called we don't know what, about an hour's flight from Bangkok, a small but very beautiful village. They had a small lake. We reached there before sunset, but our basic objective was to shoot after the sun was down and the sun was just like amazing orange. We had very clear instructions for him as to what he was supposed to do, and you could never get his pictures at any other time of the day. Even when I'm traveling in the mountains, I still go into Google. I look up where the sun is rising and where it's setting. And I try and identify where I would like to be during sunrise and where I would like to be during sunset. And now this particular picture is Dhaulagiri, the world's 7th highest mountain. So I had selected this spot for sunrise because the mountain was in the west and obviously the sunrise from the east, meaning that the first light is going to hit the tip, and I wanted to be there right at that moment. So I hiked almost a day to get there. And if the mountains were in the east, the sun would be rising from behind the mountains and this particular picture would not be possible. And now we look into indoor lighting. Now when shooting indoors, the first thing you need to understand is you'd possibly have less light than when you're outside. So if you have less light, the chances are that your picture is not going to be as clear as it would be when you're shooting outside. Okay, and then the size of the sensor will also make a big difference. In mobile, your sensors are smaller, meaning you'll need more light to get a noise-free picture. Whereas full-frame cameras, as the one that I'm using, perform better in low light as well. Now, when you're inside, the first thing you would want to do is identify your key light, meaning the main light that is going to be lighting your subject. Now, indoors, you'd obviously have windows. So the first thing I would say is try and avoid shooting against the window, because when you're shooting against the window, your environment outside has a lot of light, but your subject does not have enough light. So what happens is, because if you expose for your subject, your background would be washed out, and if you expose for the environment outside, your subject would be way too dark. So what do? You switch positions. You use the window as your key light, meaning the window is in your back and you are using the window light to light up your subject. And if the room that you're trying to shoot to is very, very dimly lit, if you don't have enough lights, try and go to a room or maybe even outdoors where there is adequate light. Now say you're indoors in a restaurant, maybe in the evening, you definitely have no window light to rely upon. Try and look for a big source of artificial light, meaning whether it's a fluorescent light, whether it's a yellow bulb. Now what do? You use that particular big source of light as your key light. When shooting handheld, try and not go below 1/60th of a second, because your camera is always subject to slight movements, so your picture will not be very, very sharp. If you're shooting indoors and you don't have a lot of light, a lens with a wide aperture like a 2.8 or a 1.8 would come in very handy. And the other is, how far can you take your ISO? ISO is fake light, meaning without relying on any external source of light, you basically play with your sensor and make the picture brighter. But you have to understand how far up do you want to go with the ISO before you start introducing too much noise. Now you're indoors, you've used a wide aperture, you've cranked up your ISO to the level where it is acceptable, but you're still getting dark images. What do? Flash. But entry-level cameras usually have a pop-up flash, but ideally when you're shooting portraits, I would suggest you not to use it because it directly hits the subject and the pictures come out very, very harsh. But then what if you have an external flash? You still would not use the external flash directly on the subject, but rather point it upwards and shoot. What does that do? The light basically bounces off the ceiling and then lights up the room. So you can basically then take down your ISO as well, and the subject would be lit up very, very evenly. So now you have a good basic idea of lighting. I would suggest you to go out and try and even make mistakes. For example, shooting against the window, right? Shooting against a key light, switching places and using the window light as a key light. If you're in a restaurant, try and identify a good source of light. See if you can place some further lights in the background. This way, you can see how you can make light work for you to get better and sharper images. And I would really appreciate if you could hit the like and subscribe button. If you'd like to have a look at my images, please do go to Gman.Photo in my Instagram page and do hit the like and subscribe button. If you have any suggestions and comments, do feel free to leave a comment in the comment box. Until next time, goodbye.